Huh. That's weird. I guess I didn't save that.
Councillor Kelly, because you can't start without her.
Nope.
Or the main.
I have no idea.
You look at the civil service description.
There's an 800 number, so if you Google. That's why you're in charge of the building. Dennis is going to thank you.
They should.
We're starting fresh.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hey, Mike.
How you doing, Rochelle?
Pretty good.
Good. It's not overnight, is it?
Hey.
Did you just come from class? Did you just come from class or you're back?
It's on jury duty. It's an overnight.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. It's an overnight bag.
Here you go, kiddo.
Thank you. Can I call the meeting to order of the Public Safety Committee of Thursday, October 25th, 2018, involving the police, fire department, and building inspector offices. Make it a roll call, please.
Councillor Dowdle?
Here.
Councillor Kelly?
Here.
Mayor Reed?
Present.
Councillor Armstrong?
Here.
Councillor Ensel?
Here.
Councillor Kretzer?
Here.
Thank you.
Councillor McFarland is absent.
Yes. Item number one, any comments from the public in attendance who would like to address the council? They can come forward and you would step up to the mic. Yes.
We know who you are.
I just wanted to come and let you know that I did email the building inspector last night, and I did CC you all on the email. My email just included the many concerns that I have with what we have with the construction that is happening right an inch from our property line, and the inconsistency between what I'm finding in the code and what is actually being enforced by the building inspector and required of him and his office, including original site plan and what was approved, and then what is actually happening on site with stop work orders and violations that are occurring, amount of fill and grade that has been brought in that wasn't identified on the original building permit and then was never actually changed until after the work was done. I'm sure you received my email and have probably read through, and I'm just here to just say again that I have put that into an email to the building inspector, and I have a lot of questions that we're still waiting to have answered. Some of our main concerns are the inconsistencies and the fact that an executive session was held during a zoning board meeting that does not comply with law. They entered into an executive session without a permissible reason. They went in at the request of the building inspector, and I think that was, maybe it could have been a turning point with, again, giving more extended time to these retaining walls that are going up, bordering two of the longest property lines, 151 feet, and I'm not quite sure the other on the north side, but ours is 151.2 feet, and it's a lot. So I included pictures of unpermitted work that was happening, or, well, not unpermitted work that was happening during a stop work order, and the county decision when this went in front of the county planning board. I included their comments as well. And I just wanted to bring this to your attention and maybe get some answers to the questions that I had in my email. Thank you.
Thank
Good,
you.
thank you.
Joe, have you had a chance to review the email at all?
I've reviewed it.
I guess one of the questions that I had from the email, and I don't know, about, there was a stop work order issued, and then in looking at the picture, it looked like a trench was dug along the wall during a stop order.
Yes,
Stop.
stop work order was issued, and the owner did ask me, while the stop work order is in place, it's been sent to the planning board. The planning board is dealing with this while the stop work order is in place. The owner did ask me, can I remove some of the sand so it doesn't go over that wall onto their property? Would that be in violation? And I gave him permission to do that. I got a call that he was working in that area. I went up there, saw what he was doing. I was actually ready to issue him a ticket for working on that while he shouldn't have been. He met me up there, showed me there were 2 high spots that were within 6 inches of the top of the wall. And he said, did you want me to wait till it got all the way up before I did this? And so in my judgment, he hadn't violated that stop work order. In my judgment, he wasn't working further on that wall. He was trying to alleviate a situation.
Okay, because in looking at the picture and then in looking at the site, it looked like it was actually a trench that was done.
That was my thought at first as well.
With the issue of executive sessions, you know, we're very careful about executive sessions and Freedom of Information, Open Meetings Act and all that kind of stuff. Was there any potential violation there?
I didn't review those specific minutes from that, but I had a conversation with Joe afterwards. It's my understanding that no action was taken during that executive session. So in the event there was, which I'm not saying there was, the recourse is to annul that specific action. So in that scenario, there is no practical result if there was a violation. But based on the conversation I had, it sounded like an appropriate basis.
Was it announced appropriately? As you know, when we go into executive session, we're required.
I haven't seen the minutes. I can't speak to that.
We'll look into that.
I guess another question I had, Joe, in regard to the email. Is it common practice to allow work to be done and then have it be approved by the zoning board or so on? I guess looking at this and reading the email, it seemed like work was done, and then after it was done, it was kind of approved, passed by the zoning board.
It depends what work we're talking about. You know, so the initial project came, it was determined they needed a variance because it didn't fit on this lot, sent them to the zoning board. Once the house was staked out, I discovered that it was too close even after what the zoning board approved, so I told the owner that he had to either move the house or go back in front of the zoning board. Have that amended. He went back in front of the zoning board denied it. So that was this time last year. In the spring, he started construction. At some point, retaining walls became apparent, and we have strict regulations in our ordinance about height of retaining walls. They can't exceed 3, they can be anywhere on the property, but they can't exceed 3 feet in height. And then you have to terrace them back. Where it can't be terraced, you need a special use permit for retaining walls that exceed that height. That's where we got into this issue. We actually took the variance in as a use variance. During the course of this meeting, we realized that we took it in incorrectly. It should have been a special use permit and not an area variance. And the significance of that is the special use permit requires us to notify everybody within 500 feet, whereas an area variance requires us to just notify the adjacent property owners. So we notified the board that we'd taken it in incorrectly and we needed to table this, have them refile properly. sure if that answers your question.
Well, yes and no. I guess I'm just asking, how common is it for kind of work to be done and then after the work is being performed to have it come, I guess now I need to go
Come and
have
have
it.
changes somewhere during the, like, move a door from here to there, or change a window. We need the plan to reflect that, also
Okay.
a permanent record. But so long as it's not a zoning violation, or, you know, you putting a deck on the back that now is too close to the property line, that's a problem, for sure.
Okay, because I think also in their, or in talking with the Shaughnessy's too, they indicated there was an issue with the deck
There
as
is an
far
issue
as
with the deck,
that encroaching even further than the
deck
plan. There were no plans originally for a deck, and now the deck keeps creeping closer to their property line.
Originally on the variance, and subsequently on further future plans, it showed it a little differently, but the deck hasn't been constructed. We know that, we know what's permissible, and so we're keeping an eye on that.
Okay. Oh, I appreciate that, and I'm sure the Shaughnessy's do, but I think a lot of their concern is that each time something happens and they're told that an eye is being kept on it, and then it gets changed and approved when the work is done, and then it's almost, I think their feeling is that the work is done and then it's approved post after it's done. That, and I don't want to speak for them, but I'm just getting their sense that they feel that there could be a closer eye kept on the work.
Understood.
Anyone else? Any other members of the public wish to address the Public Safety Committee?
Am I allowed to just continue with one last thing pertaining to the same?
If no one else cares to speak? Apparently not. Go ahead.
And just to, sorry. And I think the biggest thing too that really has affected everything as a trickle-down effect with all of the retaining walls that are happening is that the original site plan was never required to show elevations and grading of the lot. Any proposed changes to the grades, and then what his final elevations were going to be. It was just a blank site plan that has a note on it that says, site plan based upon aerial review, photographs, elevations, and grading to be done by others, and that was never required. So when I found in the code, and I did cite it in the email, that part of the requirements under site plan review says where changes are proposed, finished grades shown, Article 270-35C 1G, as solid lines and existing grades as dashed lines. That was never required. So now it was a vague site plan that was approved, and he was able to bring in as much fill as he wanted. Then, and I don't know if this really does apply either, because this was just quickly looking through, but under additional lot regulations, excavating and filling, no regrading or similar operations shall commence on any lot unless in conjunction with construction on the premises for which a building permit has been duly issued. Yes, a building permit was issued, but the grades were never identified like they should have been. And then it says, incorporating all necessary drainage features has been submitted to the building inspector, and a building permit for the operation has been issued. A drainage plan was never put in place, and now we're going 13 weeks with no drainage plan, with a retaining wall bordering our property that really should never have to be there if this was identified from the very beginning. And I just wanted to add to that. Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay with
Yes.
you if I ask Ms. Shawn?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, sure.
How many of these issues have you brought before the council? Or let me ask that question another way. How many problems do you see with this construction going on next door to your home?
A lot. This has been going on for,
Give me a number, if you don't mind.
we have been to the zoning board 8 times, I believe, and to the planning board 3 times. And I've shared concerns about the deck, or excuse me, the garage coming over the setback limit, infringing on the property line. I shared that at the first zoning board meeting in September of 2017. And it was still approved, that was the decision that was made. I shared my concerns when he went back for another 1.5 feet, and yes, it was denied. And those were 2 of the concerns where I was able to speak in an open meeting at the zoning board. But when I saw the amount of fill that came into this property, that was a huge red flag. This house is huge, it's a monstrosity. And that fill coming in really then made it way worse than even just a corner of a garage infringing on our property.
And do you mind reviewing again? You feel as though the requirements for the site plan were not adequate in that they don't include the information about gradients and topography.
Yep.
The way they should. So is your point that how can anybody make a decision, fully informed decision, without that information?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And this is my first time doing this, and I think I know a lot more now than I did last September. And if I knew all of this, and if I was able to really sit down and review a site plan the first time around, I think my voice would have been heard a little bit better at the first few meetings. Mm-hmm. Before work actually was done. And now we are in the position where we are fighting against work that's already done, but he's asking for permission and then giving extended amount of time to design a plan to fit what's there, even though it shouldn't even be there in the first place.
Right.
And it's
You're
right there.
having to backtrack.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the wall bordering our property line is right there on an easement, on an electrical utility easement that, again, he asked for permission and forgiveness from MLD instead of just following the regulations of keeping an easement. I believe utility easements, it's keeping it clear at 20 feet, maybe, I'm not quite sure, I have it on my phone, but with as few irregularities as possible. And that's obviously not the case now. It's right on top of the wires. And
I'm sorry this has been such a terrible struggle for you. I think that it's incumbent upon us to ask that there be ways to improve the process, and I'm sure that the mayor can facilitate that, and that may require further work with the planning and zoning boards to expressly state what we feel the weaknesses are that resulted in this. Sounds like a nightmare.
And I'm sorry, I came in a little late. I remember you here about a month ago about the wall over the wires, but it sounds like there's a lot more problems.
yes, I sent the email, and I have a hard copy if you'd like to take them.
I didn't see the email, I'm sorry.
So I guess your concern is the fact that initially you feel a building permit was issued without proper information on the application.
Oh, yes, yeah, and I think that is, if that wasn't done, then all of this wouldn't have happened. And I shared with Mr. Ensel, I don't want to come and keep coming in front of you, but I don't know what else to do. I've shared my concerns at zoning board, planning board, I've emailed Mr. McMahon, and I want to make sure that I'm sharing all of the concerns before we take it to whatever the next step.
And I will say too, you're not the only neighbors to share that concern.
Where's this property again?
4 Spring
Spring
Circle
Circle
is our property,
on
and that
Meadow
property
Valley.
is 3 Circle Grove.
Okay.
And you're all welcome to come and walk our property line. Please come look. Yes, sorry.
I think that your concern has definitely been heard just about process, and we understand just as far as process of permitting goes. But for actual concerns for your property, do you have any concerns about what is being done now other than property line infringements? do you see any other potential issues or problems that this construction will cause your property?
Well, drainage,
So
yeah,
drainage.
sorry.
No.
Drainage,
So-
I have talked to Mr. McMahon many times in the past year and a month
So it's
about
because of this new
drainage.
grade and where the water's gonna go and how it's gonna travel in regard to your property?
Yeah.
Right.
And that wall was put on,
The electrical utility.
Yes.
but also the swale that was built in to help get water away from not just our property, but our neighbor, like the
All
Is
numerous
that,
neighbors.
would you say that that's probably your chief concern?
Yeah.
Drainage
Okay.
has been the #1 concern, and if you
Since
look
the
in the
first
zoning
time.
board
Okay.
meetings, meeting notes, you will see there that we shared our concerns about drainage at the first meeting,
And
yes.
that's what I assumed, I just
Yep.
wanted to make crystal clear that that
Yeah,
was-
and with talking with Mr. McMahon, I kept asking about a drainage plan, and he said he would require an engineered drainage plan before a certificate of occupancy. And I said, before a certificate of occupancy, this construction is going on, so would you have a plan as to when you're going to require this? Before a certificate of occupancy, I will have an engineered plan. And what it seemed like was that he cared about having a plan on paper in his office and not necessarily caring about if it was actually installed. As long as he had the engineered drainage plan
So,
in his hands, there wouldn't be a certificate of occupancy.
so I can assure you that you have been heard for sure.
Okay,
And
yep.
we're all gonna work
Yep.
together to make this
Okay.
happen.
Yep.
And I just, again, the inconvenience is regrettable, but you guys have been, dealing with it very well, and we appreciate that. And we're gonna continue to try to find some clarity.
Okay, thank you for listening.
The
Thank you.
reason I asked that question
sorry.
about how many times is, you said you'd been to the zoning board 8 times, you think? And
Yes.
you've been to us probably 6 times.
Mhm.
And I wonder, the question for Mr. McMahon is then, at what point do you decide that, hey, this project is so out of whack that we can't let it go on? Are we at that point?
Well, there's a process, and please know that I've worked closely with Dean from day one on this,
Okay,
so,
good.
I mean,
Do you believe that a stop work order would be appropriate at this point?
for the entirety of the project,
Yes.
no.
Okay, okay.
But for the parts pertinent to their complaints.
For the drainage
Yes,
parts.
That
Yes.
is still in
Yes.
place. This block retaining wall, bear in mind, our zoning ordinance allows for a retaining wall anywhere on the property as long as it doesn't exceed 3 feet. On your property, you could put one right on the property line. The original plan was a 6-foot retaining wall along this property line. They changed that plan. That would have needed a zoning variance. I'm not sure they would have gotten it, probably not. But, so, I was on vacation that week. The owner placed these blocks along the back property line. My person in charge of my office, Kyle Berto, I was consulting with him as well, but he worked with Dean at that time. What do we do about this? It was determined by us that the fairest thing to do was to issue a stop work order for that and a 30-day notice to remove those blocks unless he got approval from the planning board. So that's where it was sent to the planning board for that.
But I just have one thing before, because that incorporates the planning board. So if we've gone to the planning board, back to the zoning board, back to the planning board, and it's kind of like contradicting. Planning board doesn't really know what they're voting on. Zoning board doesn't think they have to do this. So now it's like the past 3 or 2 times at the planning board, they couldn't vote on the planning board about the wall because it had to go to the county. The county sent all that stuff that's in the packet, then we went back to the planning board and they're still not sure what they have to vote on. So that's why. So we couldn't do anything last planning board because they don't even know if they have the power to remove the wall, if they have the power to make it a little more, better looking, or if they have the power to move the wall back. That's what Mr. Avella said. He trying to figure out and talk to Joe about what they're actually voting on,
And
or
like-
talking about.
I mean, it's true, the zoning and planning boards were dealing with 2 different things, so it had to go to both.
It seems as if both boards are in contact with Joe's office. And this is typically just as like a point of order. This isn't usually a conversational time.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
we're happy to like, obviously hear what you have to say. It sounds like Joe is in the loop with all of the boards involved. And I guess we can just hope that the stop work order will at least yield some kind of, positive result in regards to your concerns with drainage.
Okay.
And I guess I think to just be sure that there is no major work done as far as the drainage and landscaping and so on without proper permitting and so on.
All right.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Joe.
Thank you,
All right.
thank you.
Yes, thank you. Anyone else from the public here to comment? All right, seeing none, moving on to item number 2, reports for department representatives in discussion with councilors. Previously, we received electronic notification and reports pertaining to local law P6 of 2018 and local law P7 of 2018, as well as item number 2, P6 of 2018, P7 of 2018. And we also received correspondence from the Clinton County Planning Board regarding 2 proposed local laws amending zoning ordinances in the city of Plattsburgh, also pertaining to P6 of 2018 and P7 of 2018. Based upon review of the electronic documents, do we have any questions for the council here?
Well, we're in the process of, we've only got about 2 minutes
Yes, we do.
to the agenda, but I will want to hear from Ron Nolan regarding his report concerning noise, and I'll be happy to read what you said if you're unable to stay a little later.
All right. Anyone else? We'll move to item number 4, report from the Parking Violations Bureau for September 2018. Number 5, council will hold 2019 budget sessions on IT and the capital plan for next year.
Okay.
Seeing as though it's just about 5 o'clock, we have a public hearing. Do we want to move on? Or
You want to move the item?
You want to move these to the
agenda?
agenda?
to
and
the
then-
agenda?
Well, before we do that, this is not a typical meeting to the extent we have 2 local laws on the table. Both of those local laws trigger the seeker review process. We've already commenced that process several weeks ago when we established the city common council as lead agency.
Right.
That's been confirmed. We've got the step complete as far as the referral to the county planning board. So that tees up parts 2 and 3 of the seeker process, which is to review the long form for both local laws. That will take some time. I circulated some correspondence, seeing if there's any counselor that wants to volunteer to walk through it. Seeing none, I'm happy to walk through it, but it will require us to answer about 10 pages of questions for each local law regarding the potential environmental impact for each local law. And my suggestion is that we complete the homework phase during this work session committee meeting, and then when we get to the actual council meeting, we can act on whatever we reviewed during these initial portions. So we don't have much time, but I would envision 10 minutes at a minimum walking through the part 2 of each local law. So with only 3 minutes left before the public hearing, we could start, or if we could accomplish, maybe we could accomplish the other components of the resolution. I don't know what else. If you had other further discussion on 5, 6, or 7, or 8. Maybe we could tackle some of those, complete the public hearing, and then move back to the seeker process.
It's 5 o'clock.
I have no issues with 5, 6, 7, or 8.
Any questions on 5, 6, 7, and 8 of the agenda?
No question.
So we're going to go back to
Back to 1 and 3, I would.
1 and 3 of 3, okay.
Yep.
Right, 3, 1, and 3. Agenda items brought forward for departments to be approved by committee and recommended to council. Number 1, whereas by resolution dated September 27, 2018, the City of Plattsburgh Common Council declared its intention to act as lead agency for the conduct of the State Environmental Quality Review seeker process and to undertake a coordinated review for proposed local law to reduce the minimum lot size for planned unit development within the Central Business District, thereafter the PUD local law, and whereas each involved agency was notified by letter of the city's intent to act as lead agency and provided with Part 1 of the full Environmental Assessment Form, AEF, and whereas no other agency has requested in writing to act as lead agency. Now, A, resolved, in accordance with the request, the Common Council approves the following. Number 1, the City of Plattsburgh Common Council is the lead agency for the environmental review of the PUD local law. Number 2, PUD local law is type 1 action under seeker per 6 NYCRR Part 617.4B and as required for funding purposes. Number 3, review of Part 2 of the full AEF results, EAF, thank you, results in the determination that PUD local law will not have a significant negative impact on the environment, and therefore a negative declaration is therefore thereby adopted, along with Part 2 and Part 3 of the full EAF as documented in the narrative and attached hereof and part hereof. Number 4, following of this negative declaration is hereby ordered in accordance with 6 NYCRR Part 617.11. Number 5, this resolution will take effect immediately.
Good applause. I think we're at 5 o'clock.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Pause to the public hearing and then come
Yes.
back?
Yes.
Reading.
Yes.
So,
It is 5 o'clock.
Gavel.
We're up.
Pass.
Thank you. I'd like to call a public hearing for 5 p.m. The City of Plattsburgh is holding a public hearing to hear public comments on a proposed local law P6, local law amending zoning regulations for planned unit developments in the central business district of the City of Plattsburgh, specifically amending sections 270-21 and 270-0-3-I of the City Code of Plattsburgh and amending Schedule I, Schedule of Permitted Uses, Part B of Chapter 270 of the City Code of the City of Plattsburgh. Copy of the proposed local law is available for public inspection in the City Clerk's office. And I ask if there's any members of the public who would like to please come and comment on this first item for public hearing tonight. Just come forward.
I'm only coming because we discussed this, as chairman of the zoning board, we discussed it at the zoning board. I wrote an email regarding both of these laws, and I just want the board, the council understand how this changes planned unit development in the city of Plattsburgh. Changes it in no other district except the central business district. We have always held, just so you understand the history and precedent about this, we've always held this 5-acre planned unit development to be sacred. Any experiments where they reduced the size of it resulted in things like 92 Court Street. John Foster reduced that, and there was a fire that burned down the thing. It was a little tiny lot. They allowed more than one principal structure. It burned down not because of that, but and the other part of precedence and history of this is that when people come to us with lots in general throughout the city that are less than 5 acres that do not qualify as planned unit developments, they come for area variances for a number of principal structures, and they come for area variances for number of dwelling units allowed, more than one principal structure, more than 24 units. In general, there's a precedent that if it's responsibly done and not overcrowded, we've been granting those variances. The issue here seemed to be that there was concern about, in the central business district, being able to get developers that didn't have to worry about going through an area variance, even though they've all been granted in general, and or doing a sample plan that allowed more than one principal structure and more than 24 units. That you could say, well, there's a precedent that was already done by the board. They're certainly going to follow it again. So it affects only the central business district. I talked about it in general with community development, and then we talked about it as a zoning board. The zoning board all felt that it was fine, and that's what my email says. Also wanted to discuss the fact that it's the only place in the central business district where we allow residential uses on the first floor, and that, because as part of the special use permit, is going to be reviewed to make sure it doesn't have an unfavorable impact on the neighborhood. We certainly don't want residential uses on Margaret Street as an example, but if you're, say, on the river, it might make sense. So I'm only here to affirm that We discussed it, even though it's not officially our job, the zoning board. We discussed it. We're the ones who are going to do the special use permits. We're the ones that are going to end up reviewing the plan unit development. And it made sense to us that this one area of the city, and in whatever lots would happen to be large enough, would be okay to do. And that's all I'm here for. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other individuals from the public, please come and comment. Seeing none, I'd like to adjourn this public hearing and begin a public hearing on the City of Plattsburgh is holding a public hearing to hear public comments on a proposed local law P7, a local law providing zoning regulations for commercial cryptocurrency mining operations in the City of Plattsburgh. This local law would be adding subsection F to section 270-24 of the City Code of the City of Plattsburgh and amending Schedule I, Schedule Permitted Use Part B of Chapter 270 of the City Code of the City of Plattsburgh. Are there any members of the public who would like to come and address the council? Mr. Nolan?
Again, we discussed this at the last zoning board meeting. In general, we felt it was good to regulate it. We'd like it was in an industrial zone. There was some question about it requires no more than 90 dB, 25 feet from the facility. 90 dB is fairly loud, and the concern is, it's okay, but the concern is that depending on where other uses are adjacent to that part of the industrial zone, that it still can be loud. If you go to Adirondack Gardens and stand there and listen to Imperial, and I know they're working to mitigate that, but if you listen to that noise, you can hear it across river. Theoretically, the local, our noise ordinance should not allow any more of that than past the property line. We did feel pretty strongly, and I suggested in the email, that a distance be set up, just like drive-through businesses. You're not allowed to have a drive-through business within 200 feet, I believe it is, of a residential use, and that's property line to property line. So wherever that industrial district ends, and that, say, residential use is, and we talked about 500 feet, frankly, as a number. There should be some way that if that property line to property line distance is not, say, 500 feet, that they have to ask for an area variance, which would allow us to make sure that they can't, that they've mitigated the noise well enough. Even drive-through businesses, when we require 200 feet, come to us for area variances. They show why they've been not impacting traffic. This is could be a much more invasive quality of life issue. We felt that it'd be important, whatever the number is, that part of the local law be that there be an area variance required if they're there. It just gives us one more level of protection for the people. It doesn't mean they're not going to get it. Shouldn't stop crypto. It means that they've just got to make sure that they mitigate problems. So that was it. And I'm just here to affirm again what we wrote in the email.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I'd encourage your board, I think this is a broader issue than just this one piece tonight. I encourage your board to explore that farther.
Right.
Thank you. And other individuals like to please come address the council?
Hi, my name's Sue Quinn. I'm the president of the Adirondack Townhouse Condominiums. We wrote a letter to Mayor Reed, my husband and I, just as individual living at Adirondack Townhouse, about the noise coming from the industrial park. It permeates the house with the windows closed and the air conditioner running. People that were south-facing couldn't even sleep in their south-facing bedrooms. They'd have to move to a north-facing bedroom. It was a whine similar to the engines revving up when the Air Force Base used to be here, and it was 24/7. I know we have been in touch with Mr. McMahon. He's been over there. He's talked to the industrial park and to the Bitcoin company. They have turned down their fans because it's not as hot outside, so they don't need to run them quite as high, but there are times when you can still hear it. I know you're working toward putting, limits in place, and I hope that And we moved there because it was a quiet place. You could hear the falls from the Imperial Dam. You can't hear that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other individuals like to please come address the council?
Hi, I'm Tom Pillsworth. I'm a resident of the city of Plattsburgh. I spoke at the last council meeting because over the past 4 years I've been kind of following the academic path, researching Bitcoin, blockchain technology, how it's transforming the world. Again, taking courses at Princeton University, Oxford University this past spring. I just finished up a course at London School of Economics actually on Bitcoin and blockchain technology. So I think that, you know, worldwide it's transforming how business transacts. It's not just peer-to-peer payment systems, it's global identity, it's securing people's healthcare. You know, there's a lot more going on under the hood per se with the Bitcoin blockchain protocol. Bitcoin was kind of the 1.0 version of it, and there's a lot more going on in terms of the intellectual properties, what can be built on top of it, that is actually, you know, doing wonders, you know, for the world. Academia is researching it, computer scientists are researching it, banks are researching it. So there's a much bigger picture here than, you know, some of the things that we're kind of singling out cryptocurrencies as this, you know, stop sign. Just to address a couple of things, you know, the noise thing, I really don't have an answer for that, but obviously, you know, we are in the North Country. The windmill farms, the whoosh, 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 whoosh. Upstate New York has dealt with things like this before. You know, I don't know what the answer is. It probably is something that could be addressed, but, you know, the noise that comes from these mines that run fans, you know, I know is a little bit of a systemic problem. But I think it is kind of centralized, and it is, you know, you did make the thing saying that these should be done in industrial areas, which makes perfect sense, you know, not in residential areas. Within some of the things that were written up, 3 interconnected computers. I mean, defining interconnected computers. Any family that has 3 kids that have gaming computers, you know, one's down in the playroom, you're playing badminton football, in the living room, you have another one upstairs. I mean, technically, they're all interconnected by the same ISP. I'm not really sure what interconnected means. I mean, a Bitcoin miner, the computers are not interconnected at all. They are not linked at all within the operation. They're just talking to the internet, maybe mining with a pool in Washington State or someplace else, you know. So just, you know, there's a couple words on the interconnected computer. We have an operation in town using 10 megawatts of power with maybe 5,000 computers. I mean, that's a commercial mining operation. Somebody with 100 to 200 computers, commercial mining operation. But 3 interconnected computers, I mean, that's, the library has 10 computers, every law office has 10 computers. You know, all these are interconnected computers, they're all using electricity. Just, you know, just singling out cryptocurrency mining is just, I think that could be completely absolved from the whole thing and just call it data, you know, data centers, service centers. Wall Street can come up here and want to put computers in to do, you know, financial research. Stanford University uses computer power to fold proteins to try and solve, you know, horrific diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. You know, if somebody wanted to build a data center here for a really wonderful, world-changing purpose, it has nothing to do with cryptocurrency mining. You know, interconnected computers, they might fall above or below that threshold, but, you know, I wouldn't want to stifle the opportunity that Plattsburgh has in terms of potential growth, because we are in a computer era and it's just moving more and more in that direction. And, you know, if we wanted to grow Plattsburgh per se into a tech hub tied into some of the academia and research at Plattsburgh State, you know, I don't think we should stifle innovation by just calling it, you know, cryptocurrencies. I mean, because technically Bitcoin, Litecoin, those are cryptocurrencies. They're designed as peer-to-peer payment systems. But that's it. Ethereum, there's 1,000 other crypto assets out there on different blockchains that are not cryptocurrencies. I mean, worldwide, they're being defined as something other than that. They're utility tokens. People store your files in the cloud. There's a blockchain called Storage where, you know, you're mining these things, but they're not designed as cryptocurrencies. They're actually crypto assets or crypto commodities where you mine these things and you can now, you know, store data, you know, across the world on other people's servers. So, you know, the whole cryptocurrency kind of opens up a can of worms. I mean, I think you could really actually get rid of that and just call this, you know, high usage data centers. You know, that way you're not throwing everybody else into the same thing. And just lastly, I mentioned this last time, and I just wanted to clarify something again, that in 2014, we had a brutally cold winter time. Everybody in the city, their power rates went up because the power spiked above our cap, all right? There was nobody cryptocurrency mining at that point. And this past winter, we also went over the cap, and there were people, mining cryptocurrency. We've got 105 megs of power, they're using 10. They use 10 megs in the summer, they use 10 megs in the spring, they use 10 megs in the fall, they use 10 megs in the wintertime. Their power never varies, ever. It's just flat out 10. If they're using 10, they always use 10. When we go over the cap in the wintertime, it's because residents and businesses are turning up their heat, which is what causes us to go over the cap. Now the miners, of course, using 10 megawatts of power, maybe 1/10 of Plattsburgh power, have accelerated us going over the cap. But you cannot blame somebody using 10% of the power for 100% of the issue. So when people's rates, if we get another cold winter, do go over this time, within this proposed amendment, it does say that the crypto miners would be back charged, which is fine, right? But if they're only using 10% of the power, how much can you charge them when we go over? So if we do go over again because of brutally cold winter here in Plattsburgh, you can't charge the miners 100% of that overage because they're only responsible for 10% of it. They're only using 10 megs of power. When we end up using 105 megs, residents and businesses jack their electricities, and they're responsible for that 90% or whatever it may be. In other words, we haven't solved the problem of us going over the cap. And miners, if more miners and more server farms do come, we're gonna go over the cap more often. But again, so I just don't want the residents of Plattsburgh to think that we've solved something when we actually haven't, because if you actually do the numbers, and if MLD looks at it and says how much are they using, and they're using 10%, you can only charge them for 10% of us going over the cap. So I know you guys have worked very hard on coming up for some resolutions and solutions to large use of electricity in Plattsburgh, but I also want us to realize that I still think that this might solve one thing, but I think there might still be more work to do, because if we still keep having cold winters, we're going to keep going over the cap with miners or without miners. So I just thought I would bring that to everyone's attention. And thank you for your efforts on all this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks.
And just to clarify, there's nothing we're considering tonight that has anything to do with the actual tariffs or the caps. That's the domain of the Public Service Commission in Albany. Please come forward.
Hoping not to speak, I stuttered. My parents met in speech class, and this may hold the meeting up a little bit, but here I go. Mike, one of the we moved here. One of the reasons was for the low electricity rates, and I like being in a downtown area, and we're dealing with. We're dealing with the noise now, which my wife spoke to. But one of my concerns was the long-term contract for these very low rates that we get, and I think and my understanding is that the intent for that was to help the North Country and to create jobs and to help the people. And it seems to me that that these companies right now don't offer jobs. They come in, consume electricity, and that's about it. So I've said my piece.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I just want, Linda, Triangle Electric. I just want to make a quick comment to that about cryptocurrency not creating jobs. Cryptocurrency does create jobs in this community. It kept Triangle Electric very busy for the winter, for the spring. Not only was it my company, but many other. There was a masonry contractor, a mechanical contractor, a plumbing contractor, amongst all my suppliers, supply houses, all of their suppliers and supply houses, the tax rolls of Clinton County, making sales tax on all those sales. So it does make jobs, and it does create money in this economy, considerable money. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Any other individuals like to please come address the council?
about 10 megs of power being used during the winter. They don't have to cool their building as much during the winter. Why are they using more power during the winter?
No, they don't change the power usage at all throughout the season.
No, but if they turn their blowers down,
Oh, I see.
if they run at a slower speed, they consume less power. Those blowers consume less power. I would bet to figure that those blowers consume a hell of a lot more power than what their mining computers do. Right? So if they turn them down during winter or don't even have to use them, they shouldn't have to use 10 megs of power during the winter. Turn the darn things off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to add that I'm sure it does create some jobs, but it has to be a ratio of how many jobs per kilowatt does it jobs create versus Georgia Pacific, say. That's all.
Any other individuals like to please come address the council?
I had one more comment. There's one or two larger mining operations that are here in Plattsburgh, and there's also a small one. We started a little small mining operation with Brian Brienza, who took a year from college, graduated from high school to start this. We have a little company. It has less than 200 miners. It created 3 part-time jobs. We had to pay the same amount to build out our little operation as a bigger operation when it came to electrical contractors and internet providers, and we had to, we've got fire suppression, and we had to put in the power off switch on the outside for emergency response things. It's how it scales. The fact that somebody from out of town can come in there and use 10 or 15 megs of power and create 3 jobs, and make millions of dollars a year, as opposed to a tiny little operation that created 3 part-time jobs, and we're on the whole 10 grand so far this year. We haven't made any money. But it's how you scale this. It's how the electricity is used. I mean, if the electricity was doled out if we had incubators where you had, a quarter meg at a time, which made you a data service center, you could probably create 20 small companies and employ 60 people all doing something, whether it's data analytics or folding proteins or doing this or doing that. There's lots of opportunity for lots of little incubators to come to Plattsburgh and create a reasonable amount of jobs. We all know 100 years ago, Ford Motor Company, it took 5,000 people to build cars, and then, the Industrial Revolution, it took 500 people to build those cars, and now with robots, it takes 50 people to use those cars. So, scaling jobs to electricity these days isn't the same as it was years ago, but you can create a reasonable amount of jobs with a reasonable amount of power. It's just when a giant company comes in and gobbles up a whole lot, they're going to create the same amount of jobs as a little company. So there is opportunity here. It's just how to embrace it correctly to create jobs and if it's local people making this local money that spend it here. I want to put a roof on my house, I want to buy a new car, I want to go to dinner, I'm going to spend it all locally. So if local people could actually start using some of this power and actually make some of this money off this nascent technology and spend it locally, it'd be great. You can't say nobody from outside can come to Plattsburgh and use this power, but it would be great if somehow the local people could actually, a win-win for everybody as opposed to out-of-towners. But, you can't legislate that. So, just.
And I might add too that the culmination of this moratorium, again, is not addressing job creation, but I think we have seen examples for how some local entrepreneurs and innovators like Mr. Brienza can come up with a business plan completely consistent with this proposed set of changes and still do it profitably and innovatively. So I think we're all supportive of innovative industry, job creation, using our electricity carefully. Mr. Nolan?
I want to just talk for a second about this from a zoning perspective. And in general, the cryptocurrency mining is a legal use in the city. What the city is enjoined to do is provide a place for that to happen. I'm not comparing it to an adult use, but as an example, the city cannot outlaw any use like that that's legal in adult use, whatever use it is. Doesn't mean they allow it in every district, but they have to provide a place where it is practical for that to happen. It seems to me, this law is really talking about how the city is going to regulate by zoning where cryptocurrency mining is allowed and how it affects the neighborhoods that it's in and around it. And it's not, this really isn't, I don't believe this law has to specifically do with exactly how you do or don't treat electric power, how many jobs cryptocurrency mining creates or any of that. This is strictly, as far as I can tell, about providing a place for a legal business to be functioning without impacting unduly the quality of life throughout the rest of the city, right?
Thank you.
Thank you for that point.
Any other individuals like to please comment?
My name is Jamie Chopper, and I live on Lacombe Street. I'm not really here to talk about crypto mining in general, but just the impact that it had on me this past winter. I've kept records of my costs as far as electricity is concerned for 30 years. And I did see a huge bump last January and February. When I first calculated, I thought it was about $150, but I was really going at it rather early, and as it turns out, it cost $300 over my average rate. Whatever is done in terms of figuring out who is responsible, those people who create that extra energy or create the cost of the extra energy should be the people who pay for it. That's my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colin, can we ask questions? Can we ask questions during this? Sure. Okay. I'm just curious, during that time, during the record keeping, besides the cost, by chance, did you also track your usage? How many kilowatts you used during that same time?
Yes, I don't have them in my head, but.
Were they pretty level, or as far as during the same months every year?
I've never had a jump like that. You know, when we have cold winters, it may be higher.
Right.
But it's not.
I think that Councilor Ensel's asking if the kilowatts.
If the kilowatt, the usage were along the same lines each year that you tracked.
And how much?
About the amount of electricity you personally used during that time. Did you?
You're asking whether there was a higher cost for that?
No, not the cost, just the total usage, the kilowatt hour usage.
Maybe a colder winter and maybe you
used a couple of.
Yeah, I can answer.
Okay.
Well, I can say that within the last 4 years, 5 years, we've completely improved our house by putting energy efficient windows in. And so that's mitigated our electric costs in the wintertime. So this is even with that, taking that action, our electric charges went up that much. And that's complete, I mean, again, there are fluctuations certainly in terms of cold winters, but we're pretty stable in terms of how we use electricity.
So your usage hasn't fluctuated as much as what you say the cost was last year? It wasn't representative of that?
Right. And for the sake of the many people who are out there, even though this is not really related to the local law we're considering, I think it's important to clarify how the New York Power Authority dealt with that issue and what consumers can expect in the next, and if you wouldn't mind relaying that, I think that's pertinent.
Sure. At the same time we imposed this moratorium, we petitioned the Public Service Commission to consider the rate issue, and they did come up with a new tariff structure that applies in the same category of high-density load users that we're applying, in that they now will measure and see if we go over the quota, whether it's caused by this sector, this industrial sector pushing us over the quota, or just simply being a cold winter pushing us over the quota. to the degree this sector pushes us over the quota, this sector is then obliged to pay for the entire increased electric costs, so the public isn't burdened by that, but the public will still be burdened by any additional costs simply because it's a cold winter. So we are hoping and trusting, and we believe that there's going to be some more refining that they'll have to do to make this formula work, but we're hoping and trusting that the ratepayers are actually protected.
But my question has always persistently been, how does the consumption of that sector affect our overall quota?
Doesn't affect our quota,
Okay.
where our quota is fixed.
Well, I mean,
and-
but how does it affect whether or not we go over it?
And that's something they can measure and
Right.
meter. Yeah.
But if we go over it, we're charged a higher rate. And so is it irrelevant whose fault it is, or?
No,
Okay.
they'll do a calculation where they'll look at why we're over the quota. And they'll say, if that industry did not exist, would we have still been over the quota?
And so we won't be, the regular users
Ratepayers
won't be
won't be
penalized.
penalized.
That's the
That's right.
important point to make.
That's
Yep.
Okay.
There are people, though, I mean, and I will just throw this in, that in conversation on my Facebook page, that are wondering if there is some way to create some restitution for those people who had to really bite the bullet and pay $300 more for their energy. I mean, I think there's a great sense of injustice that a lot of people are feeling.
And I'm actually quite amazed and pleased that the Public Service Commission could get on this issue as quickly as they did. Normally when we talk
That's a
about going
rarity.
from the Public Service Commission, it's a matter of years, and they responded within a matter of months. So I don't think there's much we can do about last winter,
Right.
but I'm confident they've addressed it for this upcoming winter. Councillor Kelly?
Put your mind at ease, Councilor Armstrong. I had a conversation with Bill Tracy about a year ago, and I just happened to notice at an MLD board meeting that, you know, one of the several rate structures was much higher than it was last year. And I said, "Oh, Bill, what is that?" He said, "That's cryptocurrency mining." So Bill's got his finger on the pulse of what's going on at the MLD in terms of usage, and I'm sure he'll watch this very, very closely.
Now, if they are in an industrial park, they pay a commercial rate? Or is that a?
They have to be authorized to get an industrial rate. They'd have to receive more than 1.5 megawatts to be eligible for that industrial rate. That industrial rate is incredibly low, 2.7 cents per kilowatt hour, some of the cheapest power in the entire world. But you'd have to be a relatively large user to be eligible for that rate. Are there any other individuals who'd like to please come address the council on the public hearing regarding the cryptocurrency zoning change? Seeing none, I'll call this hearing to order, and with your indulgence, we'll be willing to begin the meeting and treat your remaining issues within the confines of the meeting.
We'd have to move that into committee.
We have to adjourn the other meeting.
Okay.
Have to return to your meeting and then adjourn.
Okay, are we going to move the items to the agenda?
Yes.
Can I have a motion to move the items?
So moved.
And a second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
You can adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Let's begin the common council meeting tonight with the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed?
Present.
Councilor Armstrong?
Here.
Councilor Kelly?
Here.
Councilor Dowdle?
Here.
Councilor Ensel?
Here.
Councilor McFarland?
Here.
Councilor Fetzer?
Here.
In the interest of brevity, I'll confine my comments to welcome, and we've got a very full agenda, so let's please continue.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Common Council held on October 18, 2018 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councilor Cresser, second by Councilor Armstrong. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending October 24th, 2018 in the amount of $445,865.99
are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councillor Kelly, second by Councillor Ansel. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. You have in your packets the usual reports. Let's ask for any additional council reports, beginning with governance, strategy, and city operations. Councillor President.
I don't have any updates at this time. Councillor Armstrong, no updates at the moment.
And I'll update you. You had a request from Chamberlain Marks with regard to OpenGov. They're researching it. Mr. Marks is going to be having a conversation with OpenGov in just the next couple of days, and we sat down with his staff to be briefed a little bit on some of the challenges of that, so he'll be able to report to us
Good.
soon.
Hopefully by Monday.
Wonderful.
City infrastructure, Councillor Ansel.
In the interest of brevity, I'll keep this very short. Looks like all the DPW has completed their paving projects for the season, so kudos to them.
Thank you. Finance and budget, Councillor Kelly.
I will just say that we will continue our budget hearings this evening. We're going to go over capital budget, and that's a big one, of course. And the other two, Councillor Armstrong.
It was IT and
Assessment.
Assessments next week. Okay.
So we're closing in on a budget resolution, I hope, in the next week or so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Public safety, Councillor Dowdle.
Well, we're only minutes out of the meeting. To adjourn to come into this meeting. I think most people in the audience were here for the meeting. Items are being moved forward for the agenda, and they will be spoken on the next few minutes.
Thank you. Public library, Councillor Armstrong.
No updates.
And MLD, MLD Board President, Councillor McFarland.
No updates at this time.
Thank you. Resolved, the reports of the list are hereby ordered and received, and any written reports are placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office. Moved by Councillor Armstrong, second by Councillor McFarland. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. You've heard tonight a number of recommendations and correspondences from the boards. They've been included in your packet. Do you have any additional questions on that? Seeing none, please continue.
Resolved that the bills laid by the Common Council for the week ending October 26, 2018 in the amount of $2,858,090 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councillor Kelly and second by Councillor Ansel. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. At this time, we'd like to ask for any members of the public to please come address the council on issues on the agenda tonight. There will be another public comment period at the end of the meeting for other issues, so we'll just confine ourselves to agenda items at this time. I know we had a number of comments already. Anything further? Seeing none, let's continue, please.
Motion to remove item 7A from the table.
Seeing no motions, let's continue.
Whereas by resolution dated September 27, 2018, the city of Plattsburgh Common Council declared its intention to act as lead agency for the conduct of the state environmental quality review seeker process and to undertake a
I'd like
coordinated
to make a motion to
review.
waive the reading and move the resolution.
Second.
Moved by Councillor President, second by Councillor Ansel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
With that, I'm going to jump back in. We had a slight pause when we first were discussing this in the work session. Just one quick disclaimer, the language is only potential language in the resolution. We're not making any predetermination. That determination will require us to review Part 2 of the long form EAF. This Part 2 EAF is specific to the seeker process for the Plan Unit Development Local Law. Another, I guess, point of order, rather than doing a roll call vote on each specific subsection of this rather lengthy questionnaire, I would suggest we treat this process like a work session where we can have an open dialogue, go through each section as efficiently as possible, and if the council is satisfied when we get to the end, we can, as a slate, approve Part 2 of the EAF and then move on to Part 3 of the EAF. Does that make sense as far as a plan?
That's fine.
Is there anyone that wants to volunteer, or do you want me to take the lead as far as reviewing the questions that we can discuss as a body.
You can go ahead.
Congratulations.
As far as I'm concerned.
You're in the Army.
Does anyone need any rehash as far as this step of the process? And did everyone have a chance to review the Part 1 EAF that was circulated last month and also again for this agenda? Yes, okay. So again, oh, and one other disclaimer. This seeker review process is obviously important. It's built into state statute, but it is generally designed for specific projects. A shopping plaza, a construction, some kind of tangible item. Here we're talking about laws or zoning controls. So many of the questions, as you'll see, are designed to talk about the specific impact of the specific project. You may see that many of those will result in a no impact because there isn't a specific project in front of you. Each of these scenarios, either a development within a central business district, well, let's focus on that because we'll talk about cryptocurrency in a second, but in a minute. But for the plan unit development at least, there will be a subsequent review process if someone actually applies for a PUD within the central business district, and all of those specific criteria would be addressed by the appropriate board.
Well, yeah, but I mean, in terms of informing our own vote or whatever response we are to take, we can take into consideration what the reports we received were, right? Because, I mean, even though there's no specific development, those boards anticipate some kind of development and have ruled that they see a negative impact, right?
So that to me would come up after we complete the secret process, then the proposed local law will be up for discussion. At that point, you would then consider any reports from other boards, members of the public, your own thoughts as far as a potential amendment to a potential local law.
Gotcha.
So I would say for seeker, no.
Okay.
Not necessarily. Just consider it, but not determinative.
Okay.
Okay. So with that.
Also, when they go to the appropriate boards, we're talking planning board, zoning board.
County again, county planning, yep.
Is the seeker then considered at that point as well?
It depends on the specific project, so I
Because
don't want to
there's
get
that
into a full
14,
discourse
that
on seeker.
checklist.
I don't want to get a full discourse on seeker, but there are
Right.
certain projects that are going to trigger certain levels of review. So it's a single family residence, normal construction, that would be a type 2 action, no seeker review required.
Right.
If it's a smaller project that isn't a type 2 action, then it's an unlisted action. That requires an expedited seeker process. Conversely, if there is a project that, for example, is adjacent to a historic building or is adjacent to a critically sensitive environmental area, that would then trigger the type 1 more formal long-form seeker review. So it depends on the specific project that comes up. But in this case, the central business district has a lot of parks, has a lot of historic structures, so likely
Has proximity
you'd have a
to the
type 1
river.
action, or the river, you'd have a type 1 review.
Because it's a 500-foot consideration, is it?
Yeah, for certain.
Oh, yeah, that would.
Yes.
I would think.
In essence, I would say it's very likely they will be doing seeker review, and it's likely they would do a comprehensive seeker review.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
My mouth is dry, so I already lost my ability to speak. Okay, so now we're back to part 2 of the hearing. The first question is whether the proposed action may involve the construction on or physical alteration of the land surface of the proposed site. If we answer no, we move on. If we answer yes, then there's about 7 or 8 sub-questions that we would answer. This again is only the plan unit development. There is no specific proposed site.
Right.
In essence, this is a local law to reduce the lot size.
Right.
So to me, I would say no. But again, this is one of the only things. This is one of the only gray area.
Hey, Matt, while you're buying.
Don't make sense to me.
Okay.
So do we just?
So again, we're just getting
we
a
don't
general
roll call it,
consensus.
we just get a consensus.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question, whether this is impact on geological features, whether the proposed action may result in the modification or destruction of or inhibit access to any unique or unusual landforms on the site, e.g. cliffs, dunes, minerals, fossils, caves.
No.
Okay. 3, impacts on surface water. The proposed action may affect one or more wetlands or other surface water bodies, e.g. streams, rivers, ponds, or lakes.
No.
No.
Impact on groundwater. The proposed action may result in new or additional use of groundwater or may have the potential to introduce contaminants to groundwater or an aquifer.
No.
Impact on flooding. Proposed action may result in development on land subject to flooding.
No.
So the central business district is not adjacent to the lake. Impacts on air. The proposed action may include a state-regulated air emission source.
No.
Proposed impact on plants and animals. The proposed action may result in a loss of flora or fauna.
No.
Impact on agricultural resources. The proposed action may impact agricultural resources.
No.
Impact on aesthetic resources. The land use of the proposed action are obviously different from or are in sharp contrast to current land use patterns between the proposed project and a scenic or aesthetic resource.
No.
Impact on historical and archaeological resources. The
No.
proposed action may occur in or adjacent to a historical archaeological resource.
Potentially.
You wouldn't know until you.
Okay, so
vote round.
if you say yes here, then there's 3 sub-questions, and the potential responses for each sub-question is no, or small impact may occur, or moderate to large impact may occur. If we say no, or small impact may occur, that's essentially no. If we do trigger moderate to large impact, then when we get to part 3 of the EAF, we have to give a narrative explanation. We have to take a hard look at that potential impact and give an explanation as to why it will or will not have an adverse environmental impact.
So then have specific sites identified if you think there is one that would be impacted? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, well, so it sounds like there wasn't an instant,
Well, I'm just thinking that
there are
it's hard, there's a potential for,
You could say that
But
about
that's
any
anything,
interest,
right.
though.
So it might be helpful in this one to review the sub-question, which is the proposed action may occur wholly or partially within or substantially contiguous to any buildings, archaeological site, or district which is listed or has been nominated by the New York State Board of Historic Preservation.
no, then no.
No,
because
so
Okay,
go
so
back
no
to
or
no
no
for
for-
the previous one.
Okay, and B, proposed action may occur wholly or partially within or substantially contiguous to an area designated as sensitive for archaeological sites on the SHPO archaeological site inventory.
No.
Okay. Same thing for B. So I think then we say yes, but no on each one. Oh, I apologize.
We just needed clarification, so.
Okay, no, so we're good there. Okay, so impact on open space and recreation. Proposed action may result in a loss of recreational opportunities or a reduction of an open space resource as designated in any adopted municipal open space plan.
No. Well,
No,
Is
that's
it-
a,
If you
that's a
count the
special
river.
designation.
With the river, right, you don't know.
I don't believe the river is a critical environmental area. That is typically a sensitive wetland or an area where you know there's endangered species present.
right. and
That's
besides
a
that-
term of art, that's a
besides that,
designated
there's
area.
development that's all along the river, so,
Okay,
okay.
so no. Almost there. Impact on transportation. Proposed action may result in a change to existing transportation systems.
Not system, well,
Okay. Impact on energy. Proposed action may cause an increase in the use of any form of energy.
Yes.
yes.
Okay, the proposed action again is a local law reducing the minimum lot size, not the actual.
Not the
Oh,
actual
okay,
project.
no.
it's
No,
in the
no.
future, yeah.
The law will.
The law. Okay. Impact on noise, odor, or light. Proposed action may increase noise, odor, or light, outdoor light. Impact on human health. Proposed action may have an impact on human health from exposure to new or existing sources of contaminants.
No.
Consistency with community plans. Proposed action is not consistent with adopted land use plans.
No.
No.
Consistency with community character. Proposed project is inconsistent with existing community character.
No.
Okay, so that's it for part 2. So with that, you could complete the resolution and issue a negative declaration based on 0 moderate to large impacts being identified.
Okay.
So you currently moved the resolution, waived the reading, so you could have a discussion now on this specific resolution, which is just the seeker process. If you complete that, then we move on to the actual adoption, proposed adoption of the local law.
Any further discussion on the seeker process? Seeing none, roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Okay, you're on C.
Adoption of local law P-6 of 2008, resolved amending zoning regulations for planned.
I'd like to make a motion to waive the reading and move the resolution.
Moved by Councillor Kretzer, second by Councillor Dowdle.
Can I apply that to D and E as well?
Look,
These are different topics.
Yeah.
No? Okay.
And second by Councillor Dowdle, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Consideration of the item. Seeing no further discussion, roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Whereas by resolution dated August 16, 2018, the City of Plattsburgh Common Council declared its intention to act as lead agency for the conduct of the state environmental
I tried already, they didn't want
quality
to.
review
No,
seeker
you can do it now.
process.
You can now.
Oh, okay, so I'd like to move, waive the reading and move the resolution, please.
Moved by Councillor Kretzer, second by Councillor Armstrong, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Now you're discussing a very similar process to the seeker we had just a moment ago.
Okay.
So again, the same disclaimer that that proposed resolution is just potential language. We have to complete the secret process to make it official. We're gonna follow the same process. Presumably that was as efficient as we could do it. Again, this is the cryptocurrency local law. Just to give context again, when this first arose, before the moratorium was issued, there were no regulations for commercial cryptocurrency regulations on the books, so we need to keep that in mind when we're reviewing this secret process. Because we're not comparing it, we need to make sure we're not using the example of a specific cryptocurrency mine as triggering any of these requirements, because again, any future or expanded cryptocurrency mine, commercial cryptocurrency mine, or high density load operation is going to have its own review process in front of its own respective board when it arises.
I believe so. So the vote, to clarify, the vote is for the, just the secret?
Just the secret, not for the actual law.
He's gonna ask us a bunch of.
The same questions we just.
So reiterate what you just said at the end, that whatever new proposed venture industry that is established has to go through its own appearance in front of the regulatory boards.
Yes.
In order
to
be approved.
Any new or expanded. Yes.
New or expanded.
Yes.
Mhm.
And the baseline right now is, when we're doing the secret review, the baseline is we have 0 regulations on the books.
Mhm.
So the proposed action is obviously intended to improve the health, safety, and welfare for the city residents. It's not a proposed project.
Now, if an amendment is proposed to the actual local law, would this process have to be done again?
That's gonna be an on-the-fly decision, whether or not it's a relatively small or nuanced amendment, then that would likely not re-trigger the secret review process. But if there isn't an amendment made, it will re-trigger the local law process.
That's right.
Right.
That's the way I understand it.
So we do a major change to the local law, yeah, I would say we may have to do seeker again, but probably not.
Right.
Certainly, we would have to redo the local law process though.
Okay.
Okay. So with that, back to the questionnaire.
You had enough water?
No. Impact on land. Proposed action may involve construction on or physical alteration of the land surface of the proposed site.
I'm sorry, can I just ask a question here along the line? If as a council, we think that we may introduce an amendment to the proposed local law.
Yep.
Can we, maybe at this point, table this and not go through this, so then we wouldn't have to go through this process twice? Or do we have to do this prior to voting on the law?
You have to do this prior to being.
Bringing it up for a vote?
Because we have to have
Okay.
something on our.
Okay.
We have to have something on
You
record.
can't touch the local law until you complete the secret
This,
process.
okay.
Does that help that answers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, ready to keep
You
going?
can't deal with the local law in any manner whatsoever until you have completed the secret.
Can't act on it.
So you could do.
Okay.
And then there's a second.
I guess it's recommended that we do it.
Okay.
It's a second, yep.
All good? Yeah. 1, proposed action may, you heard me, so, you want me to repeat 1?
We're talking about the zoning, not an actual enterprise.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want me to repeat 1?
No.
Yes, please. Sorry.
Impact on land. Proposed action may involve construction on or physical alteration of the land surface of the proposed site.
No.
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 Impact on geological features.
No.
No.
Impacts on surface water.
No.
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 Impact on groundwater.
No.
No.
Impact on flooding.
No.
No.
And the reason we're jumping over is because we're all familiar with the specific questions below it. Impacts on air.
No.
No.
Impact on plants and animals.
No.
No.
Impact on agricultural resources.
No.
No.
Impact on aesthetic resources.
No.
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 Impact on historic and archaeological resources.
No.
Impact on open space and recreation.
No.
No.
Impact on critical environmental areas.
No.
No.
Impact on transportation.
No.
Impact on energy. Proposed action may cause an increase in the use or form of any energy.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I thought
Well,
it
the
was
next
just
one might,
that-
but this
The law itself.
The law itself is designed
The
to
law
mitigate
itself
those
won't, no.
things. It's not saying a project, it's saying well, this law
The law.
itself, which is,
Okay.
no.
No.
Impact on noise, odor, and light. Proposed action may result in an increase in noise, odors, or outdoor lighting.
No.
Not the law itself.
The
No.
law itself is designed to mitigate those. It's
That's
not going
right.
to result in any. Impact on human health.
No.
No.
Consistency with the community plan.
No.
Consistency with community character.
No.
Okay? So with that, we've completed part 2, and you can read, based on 0 moderate to large impacts being identified, then you can deem this, you can issue a neg deck and
Neg deck.
move forward. Negative declaration.
Okay, yes, I understand.
Any further discussion?
Thank you, Dean.
Yes, thank you.
Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Adoption of local law P-70, 2018. Resolved, providing zoning regulations for commercial cryptocurrency mining
I'd
operations.
like to make a motion to
in
waive the
city of
reading and move the
Plattsburgh.
resolution.
Moved by Councillor Kretzer, second by Councillor Dowdle. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion?
I guess I have some issues with, and some concern, and share the concern with some of the residents of the proposed noise level that's being proposed, the 90 decibels. I would feel more comfortable having it maybe down to a level of 70, which, I mean, when you look at 90 decibels, that is equivalent to a motorcycle going by at 25 feet. And I think we've all, during the summer, have heard the noise that a motorcycle can create from a quarter of a mile away. Whereas 70 decibels is more in line with the noise that would be created by a television or radio within a house within 25 feet.
Well, I mean, I think if we consider what Ron Nolan, the head of the zoning board, recommended, I mean, in his email, he said that the distance from the noise is an important thing to consider. And at 90 decibels, you know, you should be thinking about the distance of 200 to 500 feet. So I think we definitely need to revisit this provision of the law in order to ensure that anybody who is in proximity to that operation would be spared, you know, an overload of noise.
And just as a point of
Totally agree.
clarification, where was that 90 decibel figure, where did that come from? Where did that recommendation
I
come
remember
from?
asking that question, but I've forgotten what you said.
We researched it on noise levels of industrial sites. Actually, the numbers were higher and we lowered them somewhat from what other states had adopted. What I would encourage we do is look at the noise issue, regardless of this industry, but the noise issue in industrial properties in general, and come up with what our reasonable expectations ought to be, and have that apply to other industries as well as industries. So we're not signaling out this industry for that very valid.
But we do.
The other thing, quickly, we do have existing control in our noise ordinance, which says you shall not hear an offensive noise beyond the property line.
Right. I guess I also would wonder if, and I know it's possible, if we can actually do some measuring of what the decibel levels are around the surrounding area within some of the residential area there, what is being created, so that I think that would give us a clearer barometer.
And I'm not really clear what you mean by giving the appearance of singling out this industry when, I mean, this law addresses this industry and is designed to protect, you know, our citizens from any negative impact. So, you know, I think it's perfectly reasonable to reevaluate and question the markers that were previously suggested.
Well, I agree. My point, though, is that we should come up with those standards and apply them to all industries, not just this industry. That is something that was relatively vague we discovered in the code, because all it had was this notion to offensive noises.
But if this law is being considered specifically for this industry, I think that we can start with the application of those standards on this law, and then if, you know, I mean, and as you say, we can revisit the standards that we have more generally as well. I mean, does that make sense?
So, Mr. Mayor, was what you're saying, like, table this and bring up another
no, we have to start again.
We'd have to start. I would say, I would suggest that we table it and look closely at the...
We can't table it.
We begin again.
Okay.
So we would have
to vote
this down.
And then start with...
Right.
Your options would be to vote it down, or you could adopt an amendment to this proposal.
Good. Adopt an amendment, at which point then we would have another
right now,
hearing.
and that triggers the need to reintroduce it.
So if we vote this down now, we would have to, it would have to start from scratch again.
Same thing as, and if you amended it, right now, though, you would save a week.
Right.
Okay.
Because we could amend it and then notice a public hearing for 2 weeks from tonight.
Right.
Okay. Real quick questions, does it have to go to the other boards for their comment if that's an amendment as well?
No,
I
not
wouldn't
that,
think so.
because that's not, the reason I went to the other boards was because there was a change to the schedule of permitted uses. That's what triggered the zoning law change. So that decibel request is more of a specific substantive provision of this law, unless you guys change the schedule of permitted uses, which I wouldn't expect to change. That was very.
Right, and we're acting upon a recommendation from the zoning board, so it seems.
And can we make amendments afterwards if we were to vote yes for this?
If you adopted this local law now, it would be effective upon filing with the state, and then like any code section, we could do it at any time.
So just so I'm clear, Peter's suggesting maybe amending it to lower it down to 70 decibels. Rochelle's saying maybe amend it to add in a distance clarification. The mayor's saying maybe amend it to take out decibels entirely and have a new local law that applies a decibel level to all industries.
No, I would say if that was the concern, pass this and immediately consider a new local law with regard to noise of all industries. So that'd be just as quick in applying to this, but it'd also give you the advantage of applying to other industries as well. So you kind of do two birds with one stone.
Could we do the amendment tonight and then after that begin looking at that?
Wasn't part of the amendment though actually physically measuring what the decibels
Well,
are?
no, I just threw that out as something that we may, I mean, we could do that when we're looking at rewriting it for all industries.
But if you take my suggestion and pass this, and then you come up with one new local law to take care of noise in general in industrial sites, if you do it the other way, you're gonna be amending this and also doing another set of local laws with industrial sites. So it'd be more streamlined regulatorily just to pass this and then deal with noise expeditiously.
But I'm also thinking, how long would that take? Because then if we do pass that now and it gets filed with the state, the residents would be dealing with that noise issue.
Same time, either way.
Does anyone know what the current noise level is at 25 feet?
25 feet.
Like at 25 feet?
I have a letter from Joe McMahon that addresses some of that, if I could read it to the board.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Come forward, yes, thank you.
Is Joe here?
He was earlier, but I don't see him now. This was dated October 23rd. To provide us with an update, he met with a representative yesterday at 10 on site to discuss further action. Prior to my going over there to meet with him, I stopped at Adirondack Lane Townhouses to see how the noise was. I went down below to the riverside of these units to the spot where I had heard the noise before, and I could not hear it at all anymore. All I could hear was the river. Later in here, he goes on to say he then went over to their site and they explained to him that they had already turned the fans down, and that they're working on a permanent solution to mitigate what's going on up on the roof. We then went out on the roof to check the noise levels. Before the fans were turned down, the decibel readings were approximately 90 decibels at 20 feet from the exhaust, approximately 3 feet above roof level, and 65 decibels at the edge of the roof toward the townhouses. With the fans turned down at this time, the readings were approximately 74 decibels at 20 feet from the exhaust hood and 60 decibels at the edge of the roof.
So that's on the property right next to the building?
Correct. And I'd have to say at 90 decibels, it's a whine. So
But just to clarify, this law only pertains to new
Thank you.
construction of this kind of industry.
New and expanded.
That's right. Or expand, okay.
Do you recognize questions for the team now from the slides?
No.
No?
So I guess my
I just want to know if this is discriminatory against an individual industry and whether it's enforceable.
As a point of order, any questions about agenda items were to be addressed in the first public questions session.
You should ask that question to the city attorney.
Anyway, this is out of order, but thank you.
So I guess my question is, since this is geared specifically toward new, we could pass this and then take your suggestion, Colin, to go and take a closer look at all industrial noise.
I think it'd be the most expeditious way to address your concerns, yeah.
And I think that would alleviate also this gentleman's question about having it being discriminatory towards one specific industry.
Okay.
So this is noise and distance, or simply?
This is just based on noise at 90 decibels from the actual site.
But any consideration we have for new regulations, I think should also incorporate the distance factor.
Yes.
All right? Okay, I think I'm ready.
But I think we need to also, I think as a body also go in with the understanding that we do plan to change this and look at
New standards
new
for
standards
noise.
for.
So the unmatched thing is we would not amend at this time, but we would immediately embark on new regulations with regard to industrial noise standards.
Yes.
Correct.
Agreed.
That would apply to all industry. Gotcha.
Now, another relevant question or issue is upon this taking effect with the state, whether or not we would want to cancel the moratorium. We're not doing that tonight, but in the short-term future, you'd want to consider that.
Okay.
Can we keep the moratorium in place until we come up with our industrial?
Is your moratorium?
That would be my suggestion.
So we have how much time left on it?
I think we have another 6 months? Or,
18 months as of February 18.
12 months almost.
yeah.
Still a long time.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
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 Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Resolved, excuse me. Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the common council approves that the police chief is authorized to sign a rental agreement with Robert Guerin to rent the first floor of 79 Margaret Street for the Plattsburgh Police Department substation with an effective date of November 1st, 2018 through October 31st, 2019 for a monthly rent of $1,200, which will be paid out of the asset forfeiture fund.
Moved by Counselor Ansel, second by Counselor Dowdle. Discussion? Roll call.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the common council approves that the mayor is authorized to enter a memo of understanding with the Clinton County Board of Realtors for proposed improvements to and sponsorship of the dog park located adjacent to the Crate Center.
What are the, sorry.
Moved by Counselor McFarland, second by Counselor Dowdle. Discussion?
What are the proposed improvements there?
They'd like to replace some of the concrete sections with sod, general clean-out, planting of new grass, of flowers, etc. One thing we probably had most discussion on is they would like to be able to put up a sign along the fence saying this is the City of Plattsburgh Dog Park, maintained by the Clinton County Board of Realtors.
That
Is
sounds
there
like.
any increase in the size or decrease in the size? So change some concrete to some grass area.
Further discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the common council approves 2 police department employees to attend state preparedness active threat integrated response course training from November 4th, 14th through 16th, 2018 in Oriskany, New York. The total cost will not exceed $452.50 and will be expensed out of the asset forfeiture fund. The registration is free through New York State and the lodging will be paid for by the Department of Homeland Security.
Moved by Counselor Kelly and second by Counselor Dowdle. Discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
I have one item for initial consideration I've circulated. Do this next. I'm not asking for any action at this time.
We're reading it.
And
Let
resolve.
someone else do it, 'cause you should,
Okay.
just vote first.
Oh, okay. In accordance with the request, therefore, the Common Council authorizes the City Chamberlain to sign a purchase and sale agreement and associated conveyance documents for the city's purchase of the property identified as tax map number 207.19-3-15 in the amount of $500,000.
Moved by Counselor Kretzer, second by Counselor Dowdle, and I'll be recusing myself for conflict of interest.
This
Further
is
discussion?
in,
Is this for initial
It is on for
consideration?
initial,
I'd like to make implement Rule 4, please.
second.
Moved and second, moved by Counselor Kretzer, second by Counselor Armstrong. Discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
I'll abstain.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Are there any other items for initial consideration? Any new business or council reports?
Yeah, I'll just take a brief moment. I could have done this during the earlier point where it was governance and operations, but I had suggested to the council that we create a green sustainability committee as a result of the survey's indication of a fairly general interest, positive interest in looking at how we can be more environmentally responsible as a city. And I would like your feedback and your approval of the establishment of this committee. I don't think we need to create a resolution in order to do that, but I've already looked into possible members. Is that something you approve of?
It's fine with me.
Okay.
Councilor Armstrong, I don't want to cut you off, but just along those lines, in the packet for the employee handbook, we actually took some initiative with the procurement policy and added an environmental consideration to the purchases within the city.
Thank you.
Very nice.
So is that contained in the document we got? I haven't gotten to it yet, so thank you. But, and I would like our first meeting to take place next week. I'd like to review the Seattle ordinance with that committee. I think I sent you all of this. And anyway, that's all. Just good to know that you back up the creation of that committee.
Thank you. Councilor Quester.
I was just in attendance on a Wednesday at a Plattsburgh Rotary Club meeting, and Police Chief Ritter came and addressed the Rotary Club about the new community service center that'll be opening on Margaret Street. Very informative and cleared up a lot of questions, and thank you so much for kind of getting the word out about this really interesting new initiative.
Thanks for having me.
And I will add too that I think the overall consensus what a great idea.
Thank you. Councilor Kelly.
I'd like to ask some questions about the DRI process, if I may. An RFP went out just last week for bids for work at the Durkee Street parking lot. Is that correct?
Correct.
We voted on that.
Yep.
Just like to know if there's been any interest expressed by any developers as of today.
Yeah, we have a plan holders list function on the city website that requires anybody who's looking at the RFP to enter their information, so we have a tracking list. Last time I checked, there were 30 or 40 names on it. We have a info session and site walkthrough scheduled for tomorrow morning for any developers who'd like to see the site first.
May I ask Mr. Miller if there was any local developers who were interested, local being, you know, within the city of Plattsburgh who were interested?
I haven't had any direct conversations with local developers. I would have to check with our consultant to see if they have had any.
Okay, so they have been encouraged to participate as well?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, okay, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. We have some developers right in our own community who do a fantastic job elsewhere in the city, and I was hoping they might be interested in development downtown as well.
We are too.
I very much believe in homegrown development if possible.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any additional council reports or new business? We will start in on an analysis of noise ordinances. If any of you would like to participate in that, feel free to reach out. And obviously, I think Mr. Nolan has an interest in that as well.
Very good.
This time, I ask if there's any closing public comments. Closing public comments on issues of any topic of mutual concern.
And just have one quick one. In the proposal you're talking about for the crypto mining, there's a clause in there about heat. It said something about 90 or 95 degrees, and if it reaches that temperature, you're not allowed to work within an enclosed space with a cap of 120. I mean, I used to live down south. I mean, when it's 95, does that mean everybody just has to stop working? I mean, 95, I'm not sure where they came up with the 95 degrees in enclosed space. I mean, if you're a contractor, if you're a police officer doing paperwork and the AC's not on, if it's 96 degrees, you have to cease work in an enclosed space. I mean, to me, that's a bit of a can of worms, which has absolutely nothing to do with cryptocurrency. I'm just, the terminology there, I'm not sure where that came from, but that might want to be addressed before we pass this thing through, because otherwise it's
passed.
It's passed.
Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean? So next time it hits 95, I guess we all take the day off.
You
Well, I think-
you regulate the temperature is what you do.
I work in data centers currently, and we deliberately try to keep them in, the 70-degree range, which, there's lots of arguments about, well, it could be higher, but that's sort of the traditional way to do it, is to air condition those areas. And
I think it also has probably some OSHA ramifications.
Frankly, I wouldn't ask anybody to work continuously for 8 hours a day in a 95-degree data center. I don't think that's.
Well, I mean, again, a data center, anywhere. I mean, if you don't have AC, there's no law that says you have to have AC. In any other business, in any other organization in Plattsburgh, if it's 95 degrees, if you do that with one industry, doesn't it cross over to every industry?
Your example about the South is a good one. We do have a little more tolerance for heat, but even there, when temperatures rise into the 90s, they close schools.
That's interior. Interior temperature.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was just an open question, nothing to do with cryptocurrency mining. I'm just thinking it's just an interesting thing to put in legislation.
Any other public comments at this time? Seeing none, there is a need for a very brief executive session in the matter of litigation with regard to potential litigation with regard to a particular person.
Okay.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, second by Councilor Kelly. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We don't expect any further action, but we should be back relatively quickly. Don't forget it.
They're going to an exec session right now. Yeah. And then they're coming back to the other side. Yeah, just adjourn. Oh. They're not gonna do any more. No. They're supposed to talk about budgets. Now this I mean, I was like, no, I came in just before you said.
There, do you have access to our website? Okay, so if you go on our website, you can use flash, the two local laws are there, and you can pull up the document right there. That's what they're talking about.
These are
The one of those.
I can feel my what do you do in restaurants? It's 95
Yeah, that was, this one I think just pertains. Yeah, that was just pertains. Yeah, no, I can't interrupt this executive session, but, I mean, I can sign it, but I'm not the mayor. Well, that's what, usually what happens is the students go up after the meeting and then they get them signed.
Should I just wear two
Yeah.
Oh, so
Moved
this
over
is-
here about Jim, before Mayor Jim Thomas. Moved over here.
Because the last time they had changed and replaced all desks, they were still.
Yes, yep, we started over there and then, we ended up coming over here when, Mayor Calvin had that, this vacant paper. They had that council table meeting, so the first time we came over here, and we started actually over on that side of the room, but this was better, so we brought this.
Because right across the river, there's the water. There's a mountain that
copy the signature. She was sitting over there. She like
Yeah, so you're familiar with it. She was here.
The small girl with the dark blue hair. That's you guys gonna do the
I was at her house yesterday.
In the north bedroom, we have the AC on.
Michelle, can you make sure two more people sign that?
Yep.
Josh, stop. Stop.
No, it didn't. We're returning from executive session to discuss a matter of litigation with a particular individual. No action was taken. Any other business to come before the council before we continue on with the budget hearing discussion? We adjourn and then move to budget, or just do it all?
No, you got it, don't we have to do the budget within the?
Kept it open? Okay. Please.
Well,
Move to adjourn?
No, we got budget.
we gotta do the budget, we gotta do the capital plan.
Would you like for me to run the
Would you
capital plan?
mind?
I wouldn't mind at all. We have before us on the screen, and maybe you have a copy with you, the 2018 draft capital budget plan. This was presented to us, and we had a public hearing on it Monday, I believe it was. And we are ready now to consider any additions or changes or modifications that you'd like to make.
Richard, can you hit that light while you're going by, please? Thank you.
Does anyone have any additions, suggestions, changes?
Well, I would like to just, I mean, I think that, that we can bypass, extreme scrutiny of the water and sewer portion of it, unless somebody else has a different idea. and go to the
General fund.
general fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do that.
I mean, you concur?
Yes, you can ask a question.
Sure.
Since the compost plant facilities have nothing planned, can we close all the open projects related to it that exist?
Yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that makes a lot of
It's
sense.
10 years old. Close it.
I would say, yeah, I mean, that would be your recommendation, right?
Yeah, and I'll check with John to make sure it doesn't
Okay.
impact anything,
Right.
but I don't think any work's gonna be done on this, so the old projects are out there, we can close them and put the funds back in to the reserve.
I like that idea.
Thank you. And thank you.
Up on top. 100.
Mr. Brody isn't here, but they did brief me on their road building plan, so I think I can answer questions on how they came up with this.
Okay.
I noticed for one that they've attempted to spread relatively evenly road construction over the next few years, about neighborhood of 1.4 million. Of which a good amount of it is also CHIPS funded. We can see at the end the implication on the general fund as we get down to the very bottom of the analysis. I want to point out a couple of roads that we feel are a high priority because of the DRI. Those are Protection Avenue and Clinton Street. We're working with MLD. You can think of Protection Avenue right in front of the monopole. We're working with MLD to have them move those large transformers out of there and to reclaim the sidewalk and redo the pavement on Protection Avenue up to Marion. Marion was just recently repaved, and then a second phase in a subsequent year go beyond Marion right to Oak Street. So this would be to really beautify and improve
It's
probably
pretty
our
bad
Ugly's.
way up. It's very bad way up.
It is, yeah,
Now
and
those-
it may require a little bit more work up.
Those
farther.
parking lots on Protection in Marion, those are private property, right?
They are, correct. This is also consistent with some of the plans that community development is working up with street beautification and street lighting. Some really novel plans that some of you, I think, have seen the designs of suspending attractive lighting across the street all along through Marion. So we can actually think we can take what may be one of the most troubling and high crime streets in our area and make it much more attractive.
The same principle at work on Clinton Street.
On Clinton. Wouldn't require as much work, a longer street, but doesn't require as much work on it.
Right.
And I know in John Fisher's parking proposal, he was suggesting perhaps making Marion a walking pathway. Are there any proposals to add in sidewalks there in Marion?
There already are sidewalks, but they've been
sidewalks.
paved
Matt.
over, so we need to reclaim them again. With that, we believe we can make that into a pretty attractive street. It doesn't get much traffic. I saw today that there was a truck unloading, but we can create a loading zone on Margaret. There already actually are loading zones on Margaret they could use instead.
Let me
Marion has some
understand.
nice place, like that church right there is actually, it's not a bad walk. If it's treated nicely, it could be a very nice.
Can I just clarify for Protection, are you saying to build up curbing and sidewalks on Protection?
We haven't done the design work on it yet,
Okay.
but to reclaim the sidewalks that have been partially asphalted over.
Right. So your Protection is a kind of funky street. Is it technically used for vehicular?
It's a one-way street.
It's a one-way street and vehicular traffic can go through there, but primarily
It's delivery.
used as loading and unloading. So, yeah, that sounds good. I'm not seeing the second half of Main Road on here. Sorry to divert the path of the conversation. Why is that?
If I recall from discussions, and that we didn't have that discussion recently, but from previous discussions, they felt that they want to monitor Main Road and see if the second half is problematic. The first half definitely was, but they were proposing to monitor the second half and see when or if they'd have to go back in there again when they decide to do the first half.
That's new to me.
I will also say I'm very happy to see South Catherine from
Well,
Broad to
can we
Stelter
just
in
finish
there.
up on the main road? Lynn, I'm really,
I've gotten a lot of.
what you got?
South Catherine.
The plan that was adopted last year had $1,510,000 for south, Main Road South, Kansas to Dakota, and $290,000 Main Road South, Kansas to Dakota, CHIP portion versus general fund portion. So those two amounts, nothing else forward. 19, 20, 21, 22. So the other portion was taken out.
Okay, thank you.
Probably for observation.
Thank you, my dear.
Condition reporting.
Mayor Reed, can you describe the work
He's
that
got
will be
it.
done on Pine Street from Saranac to Broad?
Yeah, that's something that's been dangling for a lot of years. I think it's in your area. I think you're very familiar with that stretch, and it was supposed to be done in conjunction with improvements on the Saranac River Trail.
Right.
So the proposal is to finally get back and get that done as promised.
Now, does that coincide with the building of the Saranac River Trail Phase 2 bridge, or is that still on
There's a
hold?
little bit of a setback on that because DEC just very recently, in just the last few days, asked to do some more bank analysis through there and to hold off on doing anything until at least May of 2019. So I think they're regrouping on actually contracting for the bridges yet.
It's two different projects, Pine Street, and basically you're saying do all of Pine Street. Is one gonna be in the spring and one in the fall, or?
They'd probably do it all at once.
Another question I have is, if all of these are completed next year, will that be in keeping with your plan of approximately 3 miles per year? Or do you have additional projects in mind?
You'd probably be less than 3 miles for next year. They do reserve another $100,000 for miscellaneous paving. And as you know, when they save money, they try to put that in with additional projects. To give you an idea of cost of projects, Prospect was around 3,100 feet, about 2/3 of a mile. And they did that one for around $110,000. That was a pretty wide road. So they can get a lot of bang for buck the way they're doing it.
Yes, I agree. It's a great.
Could I also maybe, and I don't see it on there, but I'm just gonna throw it out there for possible consideration at some point. Beekman from basically Boynton to maybe University Place or so. It's a it's not in great shape. It's a high traffic area between the hospital and the college traffic and so on. And I know it's getting to be in a little bit of rough shape, but just out there for consideration.
Well, yeah.
One thing I'll agree wholeheartedly with you on, Peter, is that South Catherine Street is in bad need of repair. And if it were done from Broad Street to Stelzer, the beauty of that is, once you get to the
bridge,
beyond that, it's a great road. So we would have a fantastic road from the edge of the city, south edge of the city, all the way into downtown. That would be a fantastic project.
Which takes a lot of the airport traffic too, for anybody coming from the airport into the city.
And that is a heavily traveled road for sure.
And that's certainly the most disruptive proposal they're making for next year.
Okay. Any other concerns or questions on this particular page? All right, let's move on to the next one.
Where's COVID?
Very briefly, the fire station requires some improvements for the cement in front of the fire station starting to wear out. Again, DPW felt that they can help facilitate that and help do some of the engineering with that to bring the cost down. The ADA transition plan, we need to start devoting resources to that on a yearly basis. You may recall you approved a couple of weeks ago grinders, so we can start solving some of the uneven sidewalk problems by actually getting a machine that will go and level two segments that aren't the same height.
Where is that one?
That was approved
Oh,
already a
that's
couple of
the
weeks ago.
ADA, okay. It falls
But
under
they are
that
starting to
category.
devote, and we've asked Eva, our new planner, to
Great.
champion our ADA compliance. We know we've got a lot of work ahead of us for that.
Fabulous.
City Hall windows will actually cost more than $300,000, as you know, but we're hopeful that Senator Little can come up with some additional funds for us for there too.
Where are we talking?
City Hall windows.
City Hall windows, and that's on a, we have a grant for the $300,000, but we're hoping for another grant to complete the work. Right now, we're just on the stage of commissioning a sample window to be done to better hone that estimate.
So I see the Creek Center's on there for $250,000 roof repair. And if I remember Mike Bissett, probably about 6 months ago now, was talking it might take about $600,000 to repair. So I'm wondering what the Creek Center roof repair is. Is that to just patch it, or?
The difference is that John's Manville volunteered to help donate some materials to do the repair, both in installation and in the flexible covering that goes on top of it. So we'd like to get a better estimate based on their willingness to partner with us on that, and so we lowered that price. But it's not a very firm price yet. We need to do some engineering on that still.
But is the ambition there to do a complete, like, I think Mike was saying, complete roof replacement?
That was over $1 million, if I.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying 600,000.
It was over $1 million initial estimates. Then when Mike Bissett did his further assessment, doing more stuff with us as the contractor for it, rather than just signing it off for somebody else to do the whole thing, he got the price down to $600,000. So we do have to refine that because we think we can get it down farther if we do truly have a partnership for materials donated.
But the ambition is to fix the Creek Center roof next
Correct.
year.
Correct.
Okay.
Mary, jumping back to the ADA compliance, I just wanted to remind everyone that maybe 3 years ago, the council approved a $50,000 study to find all the ADA challenges we have in the city, and I finally had a chance to read that recently, and it's very thorough, describes exactly what needs to be done, and I hope that we're following some of those recommendations at least,
Well,
and prioritizing the most important ones.
Is it possible, I mean, I know we're just approving the money, but is it possible to get a more discrete report of what is planned? You know, the specific repairs that are going to be made, or, you know, the specific ways in which we're gonna make things compliant?
Matt, could we ask Eva to, I know she's delving into that ADA work, ask her to come report to us in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I
on
mean,
that?
because if we did have the study done, I mean, it seems to
Talk
me
about
that that's the guideline, right?
The specific improvements that the 10K and rec for ADA improvements is going towards?
No, this is the ADA transition
For the
plan.
public
250,
service
250,
buildings and for the rec, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, I can get you details.
Thank you.
And let me ask, the $300,000 for the replacement of the windows, that's the grant money? Or is that an additional?
It's the grant money. We think it'll cost about twice that to do them all. So what we'd like to do is get that estimate soon on how much one will cost by doing one, and then figure out how many windows we can do for $300,000, but it won't be all of them.
But that $300,000 is money we've had from the grant?
From Betty's.
Right, right. Okay. So we're spending the grant?
Yep.
Okay.
Did we skip number 10, Virgin Waterfront? Oh, for a reason?
Yeah, back there. There we go.
We did.
Well, you didn't skip it for a reason.
We skipped it for,
You didn't skip it for a reason, we just skipped it.
no, I just didn't even see it.
So, how are these plans proceeding? I mean, I know that we've kind of discussed them as they've arisen, but gosh, so much time elapses between discussions, it's hard to connect the dots. So if we could have a little bit of a breakdown about how these things are proceeding and falling into place, that would be helpful.
Okay. Any other questions on bridge and waterfront?
Well, okay, so how are we gonna accomplish that kind of reporting is maybe what needs to be, who's gonna report out on these?
Saranac.
Wouldn't that be the planner?
Yeah, Saranac River Trail, if you're talking about that, that's work that's being done jointly between community development and DPW. Andrew Dern has been helping to spec out a lot of these details on that.
But help me reconstruct the discussion. I mean, so phase 2, phase 2 design has already been completed, hasn't it? I just need help with the memory part, sorry.
No, you're right, some funds have been spent on that, I'm not sure if the design is complete, but I know it has expended expenditures on it.
Right.
Expended funding on that, thank you.
Okay, and.
We haven't spent anything else on any other pieces.
Right.
We have borrowed $574,000, which was the general fund portion for the capital project, and I see that that's been reduced there to $374,000. So that's good news to me.
Okay. But with the commitment of these funds in the capital plan, that means that we're committed to seeing these projects through, and we're going to eventually borrow whatever money we need to in order to ensure their completion, right? So we're also committed to the debt service that we incur, right?
We've already incurred $574,000.
That's right. Well, I mean, but for the future, we are also committing to the, because I just remember when Andrew reported out to us and we were discussing, we were even discussing whether to go forward.
with it.
And there was mention made of the debt service that would accompany any further borrowing that had to be done. So where do we see the debt service on, this come up?
On all projects right near the end.
Near the end, so that's already calculated into the end of the thing. The end of the report, the plan, okay.
And that's where the Pine Street paving is included as well, from the treehouse up alongside Stafford Middle School.
Right, and that is all CHIPS funding.
Okay.
$260,000.
Yeah, we can't see that over there. We need to scoot it over in order to see it.
Which is already available.
All right. So that looks good?
Looks good.
All right.
Look good to me.
Hopefully it looks better once we get the breakdown. Okay.
Right.
What is the beach accessory repair? Beach accessory structure repair, is that just the booth or?
Yeah, I believe it's for the ticket booth at the front and also some repairs to the vendor building.
The what building?
The vendor building.
Vendor building, okay.
May we move on to the next page?
Sure.
All right. Next is Public Works. Public Works is looking for a pickup truck next year, 1 maintenance vehicle, and 2 one-ton dumps.
Dumps?
Dump truck. I know.
Dump trucks?
I think both Mike and Mike expressed really the need for the vehicles, especially the dump trucks, if we are to continue with the resurfacing agenda.
Right.
In the long run, we'll save a lot more than what we're spending on those 2 trucks.
Yeah, we just bought one, right? We bought a big truck
We're in the
recently.
process of buying one for $173,000, which is the triaxle asphalt dump truck.
Yeah.
Box.
That is to help us with our paving efforts in the
Right.
future. Right?
As will these, the one tons.
Specifically for hauling asphalt.
would you like to review the MLD capital budget, or would you like to stay with the general budget?
I'm satisfied with the recommendations from the DPW.
Mhm.
Everybody else?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's move on to the next item, which is, let's see, that was MLD, so this is,
That's back to the beginning, isn't it?
That's the summary from
Summary.
each of the
Summary,
categories.
okay.
yes.
And then below that is how it's divided and allocated up and then funded.
Okay, yeah, let's look at the next part.
Any questions about the summary?
The number 10, bridge and riverfront,
2.7 million.
right.
So
That
that,
included all the federal funds
All
and
the
stuff for
Sarah-
next there.
That's the Sarah River Trail and-
Expenses, yep, put it in
And
there.
And that first year looks kind of loaded up compared to the
Mhm.
expenditures in subsequent years, but it's primarily because of a number of improvements at the water treatment plant, sewage treatment plant.
look at that, 15
And
million.
MLD, 5.9 million,
Mhm.
down to the bottom line.
Right.
It's a big number.
Oh, well, that's gonna be because they're building a new facility.
If you like to look at the,
Bonding.
Debits. What's coming out of the general fund, $1.7 million.
And if you go down a little bit farther, it shows you the actual effect on the general fund too. You might be able to have them both at the same time. I don't know.
Yeah, that jumps a page, yeah.
No, it skips the next page.
One more down at debt service.
So there you see the general fund debt service that is coming out of our general fund budget each year.
Yeah.
Where am I looking to see this?
And as you see
The
with
general
the,
debt service.
Oh, general debt service, okay.
and as you see with the debt service, it goes up every year because every year we do a few more projects. We're paying for those bands, et cetera. It goes up for about 4 or 5 years, and then we do a big bond issue, and then kind of reset that. And it's just typically how we do that. So it's not unusual. It's going to rise every year for the next 4 or 5 years until we fully bond.
We just did that last year, correct? Mayor Reed? Any other
That's how it
questions
works.
about?
We have any bands, do we?
And if you recall, when I proposed my budget, I said I'm leaving a gap still, a few $100,000 left, because we still haven't done the capital project. So we then plug this in to make sure we're still meeting the targets. You may then have to look at the whole enchilada and still feel whether it's affordable or not. But we think we're still about in the parameters that you'd given us.
It didn't affect your budget projections overall.
Correct. Any other insights, Rich, that you can offer for them? Rich is more familiar with it actually than I am.
These look good, Rich.
We doubled our 5-year plan from last year. Last year was 42 million.
And one thing John is well aware of is he's got to increase the revenue from sewer and water, but as you know, he's working on a couple of initiatives to do that.
Right.
His funds are starting to run pretty short at this point.
Yeah, the only thing to mention there is the sewer reserve and the water reserve get used up right away in 2019, so we don't have to worry about the reserves anymore, it's zero. It's just a matter of borrowing and letting the infrastructure investment income fund the debt, if it does, if it will. It will for the current projects for a long time.
And John is also securing, we believe, going to be successful securing, has applied for some other really ambitious grants to help offset some of those costs. We have reason to believe we're going to get certainly some of them, but he's identified others as well.
Well,
So what accounts for the doubling of the 5-year total, Rich?
Tremendous amount more spending in MLD and in the water fund for the dams and the sewer fund as well for improvements to the water resource recovery facility. Get the new name down. Thank you.
And one thing that's not fully incorporated in the plan too is that John is strategizing water sourcing, and I think he's discussed with the council a couple of weeks ago, potentially doing fewer repairs on the Mead Dam, lowering its level and looking for alternative water sources that may end up saving the city a significant amount of these totals, but we haven't got that planned out far enough to really predict that quite yet. Fair enough, John?
You talked about some prospective
Thanks,
well
John.
drilling, right, John?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Still working on it.
Okay.
Any other questions about the capital budget this evening?
And you mentioned the MLD is quite a bit higher. Of course, they're building out their new facility, which explains a lot of their additional expenditures there.
Yeah, that's about what Bill was saying too, about 6 million. So.
I think we should wrap it up.
Going to adjourn?
Yeah.
We had IT on the schedule, correct?
Yeah, I suggest that we postpone that.
Wasn't-
I mean,
looking
that's
at-
not,
wasn't
there's
that
no real
also-
accounting to be done. I think we
Yeah,
can
but
review that on our own. That was really an error on my part to include it in the discussion. So, next week, we're supposed to hear from the assessor. I understand that the mayor has corresponded with the county assessor, and we can then at that time.
Mike, I guess I have a question too regarding the rest of the process.
Yeah.
Will we have scheduled maybe a meeting or two where we can go back and look at the individual budgets and make any suggestions,
Right.
correct changes and so on?
I think that's built into the process. I think that's
We were
listed.
supposed to be doing that as we went through, but if you have any additional, questions, concerns, suggestions, let's bring them to the table.
Well, I anticipate that next week's meeting, given the appearance of the county assessor, should be fairly short. So, I mean, I would think that we would be able to ask those general questions. I even believe it's on the schedule for us to bring our general questions next week.
Okay,
Okay?
Yes.
good.
At that point, will all department heads be in attendance?
I'm sure they'd want to be.
Okay.
Get the word out.
Or they
Along
should
those
be.
lines, is the city plan, I don't know if I've met her or not yet. Is she required to be at the council meetings?
No, she's not a department head, but I'm sure she'll be at any meeting you request her to.
Who?
Eva?
Yeah.
So I'd like to suggest that next week we wrap up our budget discussions and schedule a vote the following week. Does that give everyone enough time to get your last minute changes, and does it also give our Chamberlain enough time to prepare the final budget, and does it
just like
allow us
that.
to have time to make a resolution to vote on the
Well, I mean, I think that will be
2019 budget?
conditional. I mean, depending upon what kinds
What
of
comes out next
discussions we
week.
have next week. So, I mean, I don't anticipate a great number of concerns on my part. I don't know about the rest of you. Do you think that one meeting should be sufficient to explore the rest of your questions concerning the budget?
Let's have the meeting, and if we decide we need another one, we can.
Right, but
Take it
Mike's
from there,
trying to
yeah.
anticipate whether or not we can get a resolution the following week. So we need to decide the extent of our discussions next week.
I think it not only depends on our questions, but on the answers.
Answers,
as
well, that's
Right.
absolutely.
Of course.
Well, could we,
At the very worst, I'd like to see us do this before Thanksgiving if possible.
Okay.
okay,
I'd like for all of you to go into your Thanksgiving holiday having this behind you and not having to worry about the budget for that weekend.
Yeah.
And I'd like to do the same, and please let's make that a goal, if not sooner.
Okay.
Thank you.
Regardless, it won't affect my appetite.
Yeah, unless you were stressing.
The budget will be stuffed.
So-
Yes.
Any further discussion for tonight?
Move to adjourn.
So move second by
Second.
Councilor McFarland. A roll call. Councilor Ansel?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Edsel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Spencer?
Yes.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. I don't think there'll be any big surprises.
Never know.
You never know. That's why they call them surprises.
You guys can bring those things over here, we'll sign them for you.
So yeah, tonight's my last council meeting with the Green Machine.
Oh, jeez, I thought you were with me.
Thanks. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Good evening.